Okay, everyone, this is Bradley Booth's book. They call him the Miracle Man. It's a special story for our Easter week together, and we are ready for Chapter 3, Sunday. The sun still lay sleepily under the dim horizon as Malachi stood at the brow of the Mount of Olives overlooking Jerusalem. Below him stretched the pale outline of the temple complex, and below it stretched the Kidron Valley with its olive groves and vineyards, still shrouded in darkness. As the sky behind him turned pink and orange and then saffron yellow, the shadows of dawn crept slowly into the cracks and crevices of a new day. Malachi stretched his arms high over his head and then slowly rubbed the stiff muscles of his neck. He scratched at several welts on his back. Sleeping in a strange bed had never been his idea of fun. Evidently, other creatures had shared it with him. No matter, Malachi needed to be up anyway. He hadn't slept much, thinking about what Rabbi Simon had told him the evening before. If what the religious leader said was true, then the healer and teacher from Nazareth could possibly be the Messiah. The very idea filled him with a strange excitement. And there had to be others like Simon who could give him a clearer picture of what Jesus' real mission was. Others who knew him well enough to make an honest appraisal at least. That explained Malachi's presence on a lonely trail at the crack of dawn somewhere west of Bethany. The woman who had given him directions had told him that the person he was looking for would most likely be at a certain place on the Mount of Olives. A sacred family spot, she had called it. Usually he went there before sunrise. I hate to disturb anyone's time with God, Malachi thought, but it being Passover, if I don't find him early, he'll be gone for the day, and then I'll never catch up with him. Malachi crawled over a stone wall and stopped to catch his breath. Just where did she say that he might be? He frowned as he snagged his sleeve on some brambles. Near their family tomb. When he yanked his arm free from the thorns, he tore several holes in his tunic. Dots of blood appeared immediately on the back of his hand where thorns had punctured his skin. He tried to wipe the blood from his hand, but only smeared it in the process. Why can't they make the path a little more accessible? He fumed to himself. How hard would it be to cut away some of these brambles anyway? In his frustration, Malachi began to doubt the wisdom of his early morning search. Perhaps it was all just a wild goose chase. He paused to sit on a rock and strained his eyes to search the garden below him. In the shadows, he finally spotted the shape of a man in the position of prayer. That must be him, Malachi concluded, unless, of course, it was a thief. Even the holy city of Jerusalem was full of bandits who roamed the night, preying on the wealthy and the pilgrims who arrived for the yearly festivals. Also, he was in an area where many had excavated family tombs in the cliff faces. That would attract robbers to those tombs belonging to the wealthiest families. Sometimes families buried jewelry and valuable items with their loved ones. When gravel crunched under Malachi's feet, the shadowy figure turned suddenly and stealthily drew something from the folds of his robe. "Who is it?" his voice demanded. Malachi gulped and caught his breath. Whoever it was must have assumed that Malachi was stalking him. The object he clenched in his hand had to be a dagger. "A friend," Malachi responded shakily. "I'm a friend. A merchant. Malachi is my name, son of Obed, from the city of Caesarea. I was at your home early this morning, and I was told that I could probably find you here. Your sister, I believe it was, suggested that I would find you here." The figure in the shadows emerged, his cream-colored robe turning a faint rose from the approaching dawn. He pulled his hood aside, revealing gentle eyes and a bronze beard with faint streaks of red. "I'm sorry to have disturbed you. I hope I didn't frighten you," Malachi said. "What do you need?" "Well, I was hoping I could talk to you about Jesus of Nazareth." The merchant spoke with more confidence than he felt. "I have heard stories, rumors, and I have come a long way to see if they are true." "Rumors?" The young man returned the short dagger to its place. As Malachi searched the man's face, he saw only honesty and an unassuming demeanor. Yes, rumors that he claims to be the Messiah. Some say so, at least, and rumors that he has performed a mighty miracle for you. And you? What do you believe? I don't know what I believe, Malachi said, raising his hands in helplessness. What others have told me, I suppose, but it's just not enough to... His voice trailed off. It isn't enough, is it? Came the soft reply. You feel the need to search this thing through for yourself. I don't blame you. As a searcher of truth, you feel the need to leave no stone unturned. That's what it is. Without waiting for a response, he continued, For months now, you have probably thought about all that you have gleaned from conversations with friends and strangers alike, and yet you are still unconvinced. His uncanny ability to grasp Malachi's thoughts and motives was amazing. Again, he studied the young man's voice and face, now bathed in the rosy glow streaming down over the crest of the Mount of Olives. He met Malachi's gaze unwaveringly. You are close to this Jesus? The other man's answer was soft-spoken, yet equally as direct as the question. Yes, we're friends. Very dear friends. I would do anything for the Master. I think that I would even die for him, if that is what he would ask me to do. Then you are one of the 12? No, I'm not. Not that I wouldn't want to be. I am a disciple, but not one of the 12. I have never asked the Master why he has not called me to that group. It is not for me to question, only to serve. Tell me all you know about him. All I know? The young man's eyes smiled. Come, friend, have a seat. He gestured toward a nearby stone bench. What I know would take moments. What I have experienced could take days, weeks. I'll do my best, he said solemnly and without hesitation. The Master is the kindest, most compassionate person I have ever met. He is the very essence of goodness and love. And shouldn't he be? After all, he is the Son of God. A delicate butterfly stirred on the blossoms of a flowering bramble nearby. The man paused briefly to reach his finger toward its gossamer wings. Of course, he added, turning to Malachi, his divinity remains for you to discover for yourself. However, if you could travel with him on his missionary journeys as I have, you would see whole villages beneath the touch of his hand. Whole villages, mind you. Often we walk through towns from one end to the other, and its inhabitants bring their sick out into the streets so that Jesus can minister to them as he passes. He makes those who are blind see, those who are deaf hear. I have seen dozens receive the power to stand on legs that have not walked for years. A tone of awe filled his voice. And through it all, he said quietly, Jesus never lets fatigue or hunger keep him from the people. At times, I sense his desperate need to get away from the crowds and the antagonistic temple officials, but he never lets them prevent him from doing just one more living, loving act of service to a child of God in need. The hint of a smile curled at the corners of his mouth. We usually have to beg the Master to take time to rest. Malachi had a list of questions that he had planned to ask, but now he decided it better just to let the young man follow his own thoughts. It was obvious that he was reliving events that he would measure and treasure the rest of his life. Tilting his head back, the younger man closed his eyes for a moment before continuing. Not long ago, I was with the Lord when we passed through the Valley of the Lepers. I'll never forget the experience. I think I can honestly say that it was probably the most repulsive place I've ever been. Shaking his head, he glanced at Malachi with a look of self-conscious shame. I knew I would not be able to look at them for the stench and the grotesqueness of their disease-ravaged features. For a moment he shivered as if to shake off the memory of it all, and a look of anguished horror crossed his face. The place was death itself, he groaned. I thought we must surely be at the very gates of hell. He took a deep breath. I feel terrible saying it, but I've never been able to think of lepers as being children of Abraham, stricken as they are with this evil disease. But the young man took another deep breath. But Jesus could, and he did. I think it is just a natural part of him, part of his bond with both his Father and the human race. He walked among the lepers and touched them and called them by name. The rest of us just waited at the entrance to the leper colony. And Malachi, he made some of them over again like newborn babies, pink-skinned and sweet-smelling and fresh. The young man smiled at that part of the memory. It seemed as if we then soared from the gates of hell to the gates of heaven. A look of sadness crossed his face as he contemplated yet another memory. You know, I believe Jesus would have gone throughout the entire colony if people would have wanted him to, passed through the entire place and healed every one of those rotting corpses huddling there, if they had wanted him to. The young man's eyes glistened with tears, and they wouldn't even have had to ask Jesus to do it. If they could have just had the slightest longing deep down inside, the Master would have done it, gladly. That's his way. The young man swallowed hard, and then disappointment tinged his words. But they must not have wanted it. They must not have. He could have healed them all, but many of them just kept to themselves in their filthy rags and just let him go by. His voice broke and the tears flowed down his face. He wiped them away. Finally, he dropped his head to his chest and said nothing more. Time passed, and Malachi finally stirred. Feeling reluctant to intrude any longer, he decided just to slip away silently. He had come to satisfy his curiosity about rumors of miracles, and the man had confirmed them. Malachi would try to content himself with that. "Oh, please don't go," the young man said, as he noticed Malachi rising to leave. "Please, not yet." His voice had a haunting sadness. Malachi stared intently. "You come here often?" It was more of a statement of fact than a question. "I do now," the young man confessed. "It is as if something compels me to spend time like this in solitude. I, too, have met the Master of life and death. Your sister mentioned something about you coming here to celebrate a new beginning. A spiritual beginning, perhaps." Malachi probed. The younger man nodded. "Yes, I guess you could call it a new beginning." He paused, thinking a moment. "It is somehow difficult to talk about. Not because I'm not grateful," he glanced at Malachi uncertainly, "but because I feel unworthy. And so many people have come to ask me questions just to satisfy their curiosity. I don't mind telling my story if it will honor the Master, but not just to entertain them." The young man bowed his head again and then lifted it to gaze at the temple complex, now gleaming in the full morning light. "You've heard the story by now, I'm certain. It seems to have spread everywhere, even, I suppose, to Galilee and back." "I've heard rumors," Malachi said quietly, "but most of those I've talked to have some doubts." He smiled apologetically. "I just arrived in Jerusalem late last week, so I don't know all the details." The other man scrutinized Malachi carefully, then exclaimed, "Rumors? How can the miracles of Jesus be mere rumors? There are living testimonies to his power everywhere, like me, for instance." "I've heard bits and pieces," Malachi said hesitantly, uncomfortable in being so direct. "But you know how people love a story. It grows and grows in the repeating, and before long they have embellished it beyond belief." He struggled for words that would mask his skepticism, for a way not to make the situation more awkward. Of course, I have been here today. I've heard and seen for myself. That makes things considerably different now. The young man laughed. But it was not the sound of amusement. It was a burst of joy. So you really want to know? Want to be open to the Spirit of God? This is wonderful, he exclaimed almost jubilantly. At last, someone genuinely sincere about his search for truth. He stared at Malachi in wonder. But will you believe? Believe? The merchant finally managed to stammer. I want to believe. The young man stood to his feet and stretched his arms reverently toward the Judean sky. He pivoted his body around slowly, then began whirling faster and faster in exuberance. Praise to the Son of David, he shouted. The miracle is in this body, my friend. It is the miracle of life which has been given me twice over. As Malachi stared at the dancing figure before him, he tried to fully grasp what the man was saying. I want to believe, the merchant stammered again. But I'm a simple man, one who lives by sight. Please, can you help me believe? The young man halted in front of Malachi. Let your faith in the power of Jesus help you to take the next step, he said, after catching his breath. By faith, just reach out your hand and take mine. Malachi did as he was told. He extended his hand and grasped the outstretched fingers. Now, let your eyes and your hand experience the touch of faith. Only see and believe. His face was aglow with awe. The man proclaimed, I am living testimony to the divine power of the Jesus who has raised me from death into life. Like a man caught in a cloudburst in a dry wadi, Malachi felt himself swept along by a flood of emotions. Could it be possible? He felt as if God's presence must be all around him on this early sunlit morning. Thank you for coming to see me, Malachi. You have given me a chance to share my testimony to someone who was more than just a curiosity seeker. I am Lazarus, and by God's grace, I have returned to the land of the living. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He smiled again. I am Lazarus. I was dead, and now I live again.